All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for participating. We're going to talk today about how can you have a healthy sales pipeline. Uh, and we're in part two. So I'm going to talk about how is your pipeline, and we're recording this. It'll be posted up on our YouTube channel in the next day or so. So you can see the topics that we'll walk through here. And then at the end, we'll have some time for discussion and a special offer. And if you go into the chat, you'll see a link there where if you'd like to get a copy of this presentation, or if you'd like to schedule a free consulting session, you can do that through the link. So we'll go ahead and get started. So, first, why do you need a healthy pipeline? And especially if you're a consultant or a small business, basically it's so you don't look like our friend here on the right side, the skeleton. You've got to go out and grab business. And you're very familiar, I'm sure, with the classic pipeline where you're going to gather leads, you're going to move them through your sales process, and then you're going to come and turn them into paying customers and get money out of them. And so, that's simple in and of itself, but unless you are actually applying some discipline and some best practices, you may end up like my friend here on the right. And so, to start off with it, I say, when you're looking at your pipeline and you know what's in your pipeline, are you faking it or are you measuring it? And when I say faking it, it's like the guy with the bucket on his head. Are you kind of taking a guess? It's like, oh, my gut tells me I've got these deals. Or are you very precise in these are the leads that I have, this is the stage that they're in, and this is what it means to my business? I'll submit to you that you need to be on the left and not on the right. And so one of my favorite quotes, business quotes of all time, is from Peter Drucker, that world famous consultant and management expert. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And so that's how we check the health of our pipeline, and that's how we see how our business is doing, because we're able to measure things. And I'm talking again, I say you've got to define your sales process, define your sales pipeline, or you're going to die. You're going to end up like our friend, the skeleton. So really the element and your ultimate objective here is to go from capturing a lead to getting paid, right? Everything in the middle is important, but unless you end up getting paid, you're doing it all for naught. And so to start off with that operational discipline for your sales pipeline to make it healthy, first you got to name the stage. So characterize what elements of what stages you're in to go from capturing the lead to getting paid. Then you've got to define that stage. So you've got a name for it, but you have to have the criteria that says this is why this particular lead has made it to this stage. You've got to have everybody on the same sheet of music, or if you're working by yourself, you got to keep yourself honest. And then you've got to time it. So you need to understand from when you capture it to when you move into each of the stages to when you get paid. You got to keep track of the amount of time it takes for each of those steps to happen. You need to understand your success rate. So unless your business is better than mine and your experience is a heck of a lot better than mine, you don't have 100% conversion rate. So out of 100 leads, fewer than 100 are probably going to be paying customers. And so you need to understand what your percentage looks like so you can factor that into your cash flow. You can factor that into how do I make my business better and my sales process better. And as you're doing this, you need to have it feed your metrics. So again, you're going to have to measure some things to know the health of your business, the health of the sales pipeline. As you're making these definitions, make sure that they can feed into those metrics. And then as you're doing that, you're going to refine each of those things, improve them, and then repeat the process. So it's continuous improvement, especially if you're a consultant or you're a small business. As you're going, you're going to learn more, or as you pivot to different market segments, you're going to learn more or have to change and adapt. So you've got to continuously be improving and looking at what the data is telling you. So here's the example from our business where we've defined our sales stages. And so I recommend that you do the same type of thing. Your business, your stages may look different, and how you want to define them may be different, and your probability of success in each stage is probably going to be different as well. But the important thing, the thing that you've got to do is lay it down, get it in a matrix, have it defined so that everyone is on the same sheet of music, or if you're a solo practitioner, that you're keeping yourself honest as you walk through the sales stages. And so I'll orient you through on this matrix, and then I'll talk to it to a little more detail. And again, this is an example. This is what works for my business and has worked for some of my clients. But your stages and your definitions, you'll want to customize them for your particular market. And so the way that we walk through our pipeline is we have some defined stages. We start out with the lead capture, and we call that lead ID. We've got some numbers in there because it helps us with our metrics in our system that we use, which is called Smartsheet. But we start out with the lead ID, we define it and just say, hey, we've captured a lead, or a potential deal has been identified, but we haven't contacted or engaged yet. And that's probability of 0. So when something comes into us, we say right now, 0% chance that it's going to, amount to anything. We move it to the prospect stage once we say, we know what we think we can sell to this person, and we've contacted them. So it's just like, hey, you know what? Bob probably needs sales pipeline consulting. We've reached out to Bob. We're at 10% in our business. The next stage is assessment. And in that, we're actually meeting with the prospect. We still have interest on their side, and we've assessed what they need, kind of what's their appetite, what's their budget, how quickly do they want to move. Once we've got to that stage, it's 25%. Sometimes we've got to go through a couple of meetings to really hone in on exactly what they want. And that gets us to the point where we can actually issue a proposal. And so that's where we've given them a proposal, it's in their hands, and they'll either accept it, or we might have some negotiations that go underway. And if you're a consultant, you're probably going to be closer to my business model, where there's going to be some conversations. If you've got a very well-defined product that is just, hey, buy it or not, each of these stages may be different for you. But for us, in our experience, getting a proposal out there is really about a 50% probability of success. We sell into a lot of larger corporations. They tend to have a lot of approval arms. It's very bureaucratic. And so 50% is kind of what we think is appropriate. Depending on your market, you may be going into smaller companies, and the decision maker is the person you're asking to. Your proposal percentage may be a lot higher, or you might just be a better darn salesman than I am. Once we have acceptance, we call that the contracting stage, and we call that 90%. So a lot of folks may go, hey, once something's accepted, I'm calling that 100% probability that it's, or I'm going to call it closed. Our experience, again, working with bigger companies, is even though the economic buyer says yes, there's often other gatekeepers that have to approve. So it's got to go through finance, there's other approvals. Highly likely that nothing will fall out, but depending on the size of the organization and how big their bureaucracy is, there's still a small chance that maybe the deal won't go through. And so for us, we call it 1 and call it 100% once it's been accepted, the paperwork is complete, and a written commitment is in place, or the purchase order has been issued. So purchasing is able to pay us. We call that 100%. And so those are our stages. Any time and any place along that journey, the deal may die. And so we call that a closed loss. And that's when the prospect has said no, or we put some timers in there that basically is like, have they ghosted us? So X number of weeks have passed without a response. We'll close that deal and call it lost. It doesn't mean we're never going back to that client again or that prospect again. We're going to put that in another bucket. So we'll put it into a follow-up bucket, or a, check back in 3 months, 6 months, but we don't want it in our pipeline. We want to move deals through quickly, and either they've won or they've lost. We don't want to waste our time, and we'll talk about why that is in a few more slides. And then not a sales stage, but an important thing that we track is when we get the first payment from the client. And because in our system, we keep the same database to keep track of all those things together. I'm listing it here. And I encourage you to grab that as a metric or a date that you capture. And that's really important in a consulting business, or if you're selling to larger corporations, because their accounts payable process or their terms may be non-negotiable, and they may be very, very long. So we're working with clients today that, that range from net 30 to net 45 and net 60. And I have worked with clients in the past where payment could be as long as net 120. So if you think about that, it's like, hey, I've invoiced, and maybe I've even done the work and completed the work and invoiced, but it's going to be 120 days until I get paid. So that's very important to understand from a metrics perspective. And it's not a sales stage per se, but it's it's linked, arm in arm to your sales stages. So that's the first step to really have a good pipeline, is say, here is what my definitions are, and here are the percentages that are associated with them. And I've seen, I've talked with folks, I've been in places where it's like, yeah, we got the stages, but you know what? Our sales guys are really, really good. They're super experienced. And the way we want to do it is just, we tell them what a stage is, and then they go and they kind of a feel for the customer and a feel for the probability. And so they just fill out what they think it is. You can do that, but I don't recommend it, because you're not going to be comparing apples to apples. Human self-interest being what it is, there might be a little bit of tweaking of the data. And as you're looking at it, you're not going to be able to really understand your overall sales pipeline. So get a disciplined approach and have folks walk through it, and everybody be on the same sheet of music is a best practice. So once you've done that, that's essentially the foundation you need to really have a healthy pipeline. But that foundation doesn't mean anything unless you're measuring stuff and acting on it. So let's talk about that. So for me, in my experience and what I've seen at clients, I call these the top 7 sales pipeline metrics, and let's talk about them. So first is your new leads capture rate. So how many new leads, how many opportunities are coming into your business on a periodic basis? And you may count that on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, but you got to have a look and say, am I generating more prospects, leads that are going to turn into prospects that can become paying customers? And is that number going up or going down? And then your conversion rate. So I may have, as I said earlier, you may get 100 leads, but if none of them become customers, then it's kind of pointless. But you want to understand, well, what am I doing on a conversion rate? Meaning I get a lead and they become a paying customer. That's your conversion rate. Next is your lead conversion cycle time. So it's great. Maybe you're 50%. I get 100 leads and 50 of them become customers. Well, that's fantastic. But if it takes a year for that to happen, that could be a serious problem. So you want to look at the cycle time. And when we get into more sophisticated things, not on this call, but you might need to segment your customers or segment your markets and see what each of those cycle times are, or what those conversion rates are by market segment, for example. Next is the average initial transaction value. So, maybe you've got 100 leads coming in, you got a 50% conversion rate, it goes pretty fast, but each deal is worth $10. You say, well, that's okay, but compare that to a transaction value. Let's talk a $10,000 consulting deal versus a $100,000 consulting deal, that initial transaction value makes a difference on how you look at your pipeline and how important those cycle times are and those conversion rates are given the size of the deals that you have. So that's an important thing to measure and to understand and to look at the trends. Fifth is the average lifetime transaction value. And I'm doing air quotes with my fingers because, once you've got a customer, is it a one and done? Or does your business really lend itself to land and expand and say, hey, I'm going to get in there with, initially I'm just going to talk to them, in my case, about their sales pipeline. But, once I do that, they're going to want me to look at their sales operations as a whole, or maybe their entire business operations or their after sales service operations. And so the lifetime value of that customer might be a lot bigger, and I need to measure that for the same reasons that I want to measure the initial transaction value. Number 6, look at your sales stage fallout rate. And so, I had the 5 stages that I have deals walk through. You may have more or less, but important to understand, I get 100 leads, but only 50% of those turn into proposals, or maybe 25 of them turn into proposals. So it's important to know that entire conversion rate, which is from lead identification to paying customer, but I also want to know where do they get lost in each of the stages, because that'll help me model what my business is and understand kind of those probabilities. I can tweak the probabilities based on reality. And then finally, the last one for me is looking at the sales stage cycle time. And again, this is, a subset of item 3. So it's, you've got that deal conversion time from lead ID to paying customer, but it's really important to understand how long does it take within each of those stages, because it's different from, hey, once I get a proposal, I get to closure, a day later. That's important to understand. Or is like, man, I can capture a lead and I can get a proposal out in 1 day, but it takes 2 months before it actually closes. That's important information to understand. And so these are the metrics that you need to have to make sure that your sales process is working properly, and to partner with your finance team, or if you're a solo practitioner, so you can understand what's going on with the money that's going to come in so you can run your business. All of this, it's very important to have what we call a single source of truth. And I'm speaking of it from 2 sides of the same coin. Data storage and agreement. So in the IT world, a single source of truth really talks about a data storage principle that says, hey, a particular piece of information is always coming from one place. So I know where that is. You may have heard the term system of record, meaning if I want to look and see what's going on with sales or going on a lead, or when that lead hit a stage, I'm going to one place to get that information. The other side of the coin is the single version of truth. And that talks about having one view of the data that everybody in the company can agree is real. So they trust the number for operating data or sales data. And of course, if you're a sole practitioner, you're the only one looking in a place, and you're the only one that you have to agree, but it'll help you keep yourself honest. But for a larger organization, it's very important from an efficiency perspective and from business truth, because you can avoid dueling data sets. And what I mean by that is, you've probably been in meetings when you're sitting around the table and somebody says, hey, here is what's going on. And then the person at the other side of the table goes, no, my numbers show this. This may be within your own company, or it may be with a customer. But until you have a single version of the truth, you're going to waste a lot of time. So very important to have that single source of truth for your sales pipeline and for your sales operations. We use Smartsheet, and you can look at our PPS YouTube channel, you can see an example of it in action where we use Smartsheet to do a sales pipeline and use these same principles. So I won't spend a lot of time on that. You can look it up on YouTube, or you can schedule a separate session with me. We use what we call our sales operation maturity model. Again, that's going to be a separate session, but we apply the maturity levels defined through project management capability maturity model and the organizational management maturity model. So these, if you're a PMP or a project management person, you're probably familiar with these models. We apply them to sales. And so basically what we've seen is if you go from a less mature operation or sales operation to a more mature, where it's managed, where you have things defined, you have consistent success, a higher rate of consistent success. And so the pipeline health check, which is kind of the last thing on this webinar, is an element of determining that maturity of your organization specific to the sales pipeline. And so here's the cherry on top, the final answer to the question of how healthy is your sales pipeline? Is it sick? Answer these questions and it'll give you a good idea. So first, have you defined your sales stages? So this is an easy yes or no. You know, if you haven't defined them, then your sales pipeline, I say by de facto, is not healthy because you really don't know what it is and you really don't have one. Number two is you may have a great definition, but are you tracking your lead against those definitions and against those stages? So you might have the most beautiful model in the world, but if you're not using it, it doesn't do you any good. So you're not healthy if the answer is no. Do you have your metrics defined? And so if you just got the pipeline and you have things going through, but you're not really tracking it or making it into metrics, and if the way you're capturing the data in this pipeline doesn't enable you to calculate your metrics, then again, you're not healthy. So you need to answer yes to that. And then, are you reviewing those metrics on a regular basis? And this is kind of just like number two. It's like, hey, you got this great stuff in place, but you never look at it. It's not doing you any good. And then, do you take action based on those metrics? And so my analogy for this is, you know, I may go, man, during the pandemic, I've gained a few pounds. I really need to lose 20 pounds. All right, so I'm gonna get on a scale every morning, weigh myself, and that'll let me know, am I getting to my goal of, let me lose 10 pounds and hit my target weight? Well, that's fantastic. That's a great step. But if I simply stand on the scale and then do nothing different and just eat, drink, and exercise or not exercise, that consistent metric tracking is not going to do any good. So you got to track these metrics, but you've got to do something about it in order to maintain or improve your sales pipeline health check. Now, maybe your metrics are going to be perfect and you look at it and you go, man, I'm smoking, I'm doing fantastic. I don't have to take any action other than go, yes, everything I'm doing is great. I'm going to keep doing it. That's a rare, I don't think I've run across anybody where that's the case. Is your pipeline accessible and up to date? And so you may have yes to all 5 of the preceding questions for your health check. But if you've got it in some convoluted system, or you only update it once a month or once a quarter, then you're doing all the previous things right, but it's probably not going to be healthy enough. You're not going to be able to take action on it because it's just not going to be relevant or timely. Next, what's the shape of your pipeline? And the traditional pipeline is that funnel. And when you talk about the shape is, where are things in the segment? Because if you end up, you've got a bowl, it may mean that things are kind of stuck in the middle. So you've captured some leads, you qualify a prospect perhaps, but then as you're going through the assessment, it takes a hell of a long time. You've got a bowl instead of a funnel or a cocktail glass. So that shape of the pipeline graphically helps you understand where, what's the health of it, because you want to really have the right number of prospects, number 8, at each stage of your pipeline. And so looking at that, you say, hey, ideally, I want a flow that looks like this. I want it to be fast, or looking at it from month to month, it may be, I'm doing great. And then all of a sudden, oh crap, I have nothing in the leads. Stage 0 is empty. I'm going to run out of prospects and deals very soon. Or, boy, I've got a whole bunch in the assessment phase in my case, but I haven't gotten to a single proposal yet. Those are the things that you need to understand. Where are you with each stage? Number 9, is it moving? So that's related to the shape of the pipeline and where they are in the prospect. But do you have deals stuck? Is your sales pipeline moving or not? That agility, the velocity of your sales pipeline is really important. And so you want to be measuring that. And then, when are deals purged? So I talked about, if I'm ghosted for a number of weeks, I take those deals out of my pipeline. I call them lost, and I put them in a bucket that says I'm going to follow up with them. So you want to have a pipeline that is relevant and recent. And if you have a bunch of things that are just hanging out, it's going to obscure, it's going to cloud your deal flow and cloud what's in the pipeline. And that will mean that you're not going to be able to answer yes to number 10, the final health check. So do you know which deals within your pipeline you need to focus on? And so, part of the pipeline is to understand trends, to see, hey, am I doing better? Am I doing worse? Do I need to take some action? But part of it should also be, well, gosh, I've got a deal moving through. Which one? This one's stalled. Let me go work on it. So it's just that classic, or this one's worth a hell of a lot of money. I think it'll close. Let me go work on it. So you want to be able to know which of the deals you need to focus on. And if you can do that, that's a sign of a healthy pipeline. So those were the 10 questions that was that you need to ask. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. You can stay on and do a deeper discussion. If you click on the link, you'll be able to open a Smartsheet form. We use Smartsheet for a lot of things here. And you can just come in, fill in your name, email, and I can either send you the presentation or you can ask for a free consultation. Again, I'll have a link there that you can go to YouTube and you can see our previous webinars. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and stop recording now.